Hi, I'm Sam here at Rick Jones Pianos with a really lovely studio upgrade. This is a Baldwin Hamilton built in Truman, Arkansas in 1994. It's a legendary model. If you went to school in the United States, you have probably encountered this exact piano model. This has been immensely popular in schools and other institutions because of its very durable case. It has double casters which will allow two people to move it around like different classrooms or practice rooms or band rooms around the band room, a ballet studio. Really functional, has a gigantic music desk that will allow like a chorus or orchestral accompanist to lay out a whole bunch of sheet music. It's also just short enough for a pianist like that to be able to see over the piano and perhaps take cues from a band leader, orchestral conductor, chorus leader. Really a very thoughtful design. And it was one of many models that were made in this cabinet style of this height. But this sold so well, I think, because, in my opinion, it was a really good design and a really good quality piano. Baldwin was, for many decades in the 20th century, one of Steinway's biggest rivals for the concert stage. And being based in Cincinnati, Ohio, they certainly had the allegiance of many in the Midwest, the South of this country, who preferred a piano that was made closer to home than something made in New York by Steinway. And they were known for really good quality, really durable pianos, really solid construction. Their pin blocks had many, many layers. Some of them even had 35 layers of laminated hardwood that would really grip the tuning pins well. And so it's no surprise that Baldwin pianos tend to stay in tune really well, even when they reach a really old age. All original 50s Baldwins we've come across have really tight tuning pins, as long as they've been well taken care of. It's just a really solidly made piano. And they also had their own idea about how a piano should sound. And in my opinion, is typically American, very warm, a bit on the mellow side. If it's voiced mellow, it lends itself well to a mellow voicing because of its essentially warm sound. And what I like so much about Baldwin's is the especially sweet sound they get out of the melody range, and that applies to every Baldwin model, all the way down to the acrosonic spin it up to the concert grand. They all have this, in my opinion, this really unified idea of a really sweet sounding melody range, which really makes melodies sound beautiful. And well, they had in their best days many pianists who chose them over Steinway as their preferred piano to perform on. Most notably, off the top of my head, Dave Brubeck, the jazz pianist, and then Earl Wild, the classical pianist, who really got a beautiful sound out of his Baldwin. So a lot going for this piano. This one, not especially old, 1994, is relatively young in our inventory, and it hasn't been used very much. We can tell it has not been an institution because the cabinet would not look this clean and undamaged if it were in an institution. It has this satin oak finish with its original matching bench, and I'll add that it's likewise hardly used. Usually benches tend to be pretty rough. They tend to get beat up because people sit on them, they shove them around a room. It even still has an original price tag from when it was sold new. Baldwin Upright Model 243. That was the official model number of the Hamilton studio. So really the pianos had an easy life, didn't need a whole lot of work when it came in, although my colleagues still checked the regulation and cleaned up everything and had it tuned nicely, and it really has a wonderful sound and a beautiful, really smooth, responsive touch. I think a perfect piano for a relatively young student who's new to the piano and wants to get started on the right track and really get going with piano lessons and improving their playing ability. This piano will be able to do that for you. Having said all that, I'll call the tone a 4 on a scale from 1 to 10, from mellow to bright. Baldwin is known for more of a mellow, warm sound, as many American companies were, and I think Baldwin represents one of the better examples of that kind of tone. It's not that it lacks clarity, but it doesn't have the real brightness that you sometimes hear in pianos made in Japan or Germany or Europe in general. That is something that American companies have prioritized in their design of a piano, and so if you grew up with a big old American vintage upright, this piano is going to remind you a lot of the sound of that piano. It has a warmer sound and a really deep sounding bass too. The touch I kind of forgot to think about. That usually means it's neutral. Then I'll call it neutral. It's a 5 on the scale from 1 to 10, from light to firm. It didn't strike me as being too hard or too easy, just an average amount of resistance in the keys, and again, perfect recommendation, I think, for a young student who's maybe graduating from a tired old upright or a digital piano. You want something with enough resistance to prepare you for the more massive feel of a grand piano, but maybe not too much that would overwhelm your fingers. So 4 and 5 for the tone and touch. Of course, like everything else we sell, it has a 10-year warranty, all parts and labor, and 100% lifetime trade-up guarantee. Please make sure you have it in tune twice a year by a professional technician and kept away from extremes of humidity. Doing so will ensure the structural integrity of the piano, especially its wooden components, and we would ask that you do that with any piano, no matter the size or the brand or the type. And well, if you do that, you can return to us at any point in the future, trade this piano in precisely for its instrument sales price, and merely pay the difference in price between piano 1 and piano 2, plus any tax or shipping if it pertains. That's what we mean by 100% lifetime trade-in. That number doesn't go down if you trade in with us. And teachers very often recommend our store specifically because not only they know that we regulate our pianos, which is very important for the teachers, they want the keyboard, the action to work flawlessly and uniformly. That's what a proper regulation will do. But they recommend us because they know their students can trade up as they continue to practice and improve in their playing ability, and it may very well be up to the teacher's discretion when to recommend a substantially nicer piano. They might recommend a full-size upgrade after this, although the tone is already pretty deep in the bass. A teacher who's really pushing you will probably recommend at least a baby grand, a substantially nicer piano to upgrade to after this piano. But rest assured, Baldwin's really well-built pianos. If you take good care of it, you can keep it for many, many years without having to worry about trading it in for any reason. If you don't have an aspiration to get a grand piano or whatever, it's a solid piano that can last you a lifetime if you take good care of it. So please stop by, try it out for yourself. You can play it along with anything else in our inventory. But if you can't make it, you can always send us an email or give us a phone call if you have any questions.